Okay. So for those of you I can see on the screen and for those with their cameras off, either way that's okay. But either virtually or physically raise your hand if you've ever felt scared of saying the wrong thing. My hand is going up there. I can see some hands being raised. Yeah, I have definitely felt like that. And it wasn't until I did three things that I started to move through that fear of saying the wrong thing. The first thing was, it's very simple, is that I just realized that, you know what, we're human. We are going to say the wrong thing at times. Once I reminded myself of that, okay, we're human, we're going to say the wrong thing, I just started to be a lot kinder to myself, give myself a little bit more grace. And then thirdly, I increased my confidence through lots and lots of learning. I have lots of tips that I'm going to share with you in this session today. But before I introduce myself, I want you to think about this and take advantage of the chat box here. What number do you think is behind this percentage symbol here? What percent of people do you think are too scared to talk about topics like diversity and inclusion at work because they're scared of saying the wrong thing? We're going high. I can see already. So we've got 60, 80, 55. Okay. Yeah, let's hear from a few more people. What number do we think? The average guess is usually around the 70 to 80% mark. And we've got here similar numbers. So we're all going with the majority. We're going with a high number. And there is somebody here that has got the exact right number. That's the first time that's ever happened. So well done, Marie. A virtual prize for me there. The reason why I put that number on the screen and the reason why I ask you and the reason why I let you know those high numbers is because I want to reassure you, really. We all put our hands up at the start. We believe that most people are scared of saying the wrong thing. And you'll see that if you can see my cursor, this data is from 2021. It's 4 years old now. And I believe from doing this talk, having this topic of conversation with a lot of people, that this number is only growing. We're only becoming more scared of saying the wrong thing. And I'd be really interested to see if Right Track do another survey of this kind to see how the numbers changed over the last few years. So it's about time I introduce myself. So, hi everybody, my name is Brooklyn. My pronouns are she, her. I work as a diversity and inclusion consultant, and I'm here because Lisa, Nicole, and Julie, we are all in the diversity inclusion space, and invited me to host a session on behalf of Mantra Strategy. I love to talk about diversity and inclusion because I see that a lot of the times it's a topic that has a bit of a bristle effect. I go to networking events and I introduce myself. I say, "Oh, I'm a diversity inclusion consultant," and people pull away. You can see it because there is that fear of saying the wrong thing. But I like to create content and topics in a way that feel accessible for people. People can go away feeling like, I know my role, I've got a small action that I can do that's going to have a positive impact. And my approach, which you'll learn about today, is very conversational. I love to bring people more into the conversation. But just to let you know, as much as you can get involved through the chat box and unmuting yourself, I won't pick on anybody today. And it's a place for curiosity rather than criticism. I don't expect perfect answers from people. And the data tells us that diversity and inclusion doesn't work when people feel like they've got to bite their tongue. So I want to create a space where people can get involved in the conversation and try and remove that fear for us because most of us feel scared of saying the wrong thing. We've probably all heard these things on the screen. Things like woke culture. I like to post content on TikTok, and that's often a popular comment that I get on there. Or it's all gone too far. Can't keep up with what you can and can't say anymore. We might have heard these things. We may have felt like this as well, and that's okay too. I always encourage people as well, if there's anything I say that you want to challenge, you're more than welcome to challenge in this session or to connect with me on LinkedIn or TikTok, and we can continue the conversation there too. But we have 45 minutes together today. And in this session, what I would love for people to do is to leave feeling more confident, I'm going to provide you with strategies to have those conversations you're fearful of. You'll all get a toolkit sent from Mantra Strategy full of tips and some language you can use when you're having different topics and conversations. That's really there to boost your confidence. But what I'm also going to give you is some knowledge of what to say and what you can do when you say the wrong thing. Because, like I said at the start, we're human. We are going to put our foot in it at times. I do, and I work in this space. But I'm going to give you some tips and some language of what we can do in that scenario as well. So what I want to do now is put people in breakouts. There won't be ones and twos, there'll be small groups. So if you don't want to get involved in the conversation, you can sit and observe or perhaps use the chat box. But I'd like you to just for 3 minutes now, explore this question. We know that most of us feel scared of saying the wrong thing, but what are some reasons you think people are scared of saying the wrong thing? You should be invited into a breakout in a couple of minutes, or even a couple of seconds. So you should be invited, and just let people know these won't be recorded as well. So for 3 minutes, just have a little chat why you think people are scared of saying the wrong thing. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry if I was interrupting your conversations there, but I am keen to hear from you. What came up for people when they were thinking about why people are scared of saying the wrong thing? And feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or use the chat box.
I go, Lisa.
I suppose we were just talking about people being concerned first and foremost by causing offence to another person, not wanting to do that to someone else. And on from that, I suppose if someone has said something wrong, worried about maybe being labelled as a result of that for not knowing something. So maybe something that was unconscious for the person that they just weren't aware of. But so if they've said the wrong thing, then will they be labelled as being against a particular group or what have you, as opposed to they just didn't know something and wish that they had been more aware.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. So it's that feeling of going in with good intentions, but then being worried about cancel culture.
Yeah.
Definitely cancel culture. And also just that the language landscape has changed quite a lot. Lisa and I were talking about that what you could have said a few years ago might not be appropriate now. And, are people kind of up to speed? I was saying the example of with my dad, having a lunch and he'll say something. I'm like, Dad, you can't say that anymore. And he'd be like, oh, can I not? So is there that awareness of what you can and you can't say, what the right words are?
Yeah, we can probably all relate to a parent or a grandparent. Just
Exactly.
oh no. Thanks, Julie. Who else? Who had some thoughts on why people feel scared at the minute?
Oh, we had the same sort of conversation in that it's difficult to keep up. We find it a bit unnerving, but I think there's also the thing of being out of touch because you talked about your dad. I mean, always the older generation will have say the wrong word for cool or stuff like that. In those days, it was kind of it was a low rent mistake to make, whereas the stakes seem an awful lot higher now, and it's cross cultural and it's bigger, and it's the consequences feel bigger, and you feel a little bit at sea sometimes. So that's kind of where our conversation went.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, David. There's some common lists and reasons on the screen here, but I mean, this list could be endless. Often we hear things like, I just don't want to offend others. And if we feel like we're not knowledgeable or we lack confidence, we'll just steer clear of that uncomfortable subject entirely. And there is that perception, like you were talking about, David, that you make a genuine mistake, it's game over. So that cancel culture comes up. I often hear as well people say things like, but who am I to get involved in that? I don't have lived experience on that topic. So I'm just going to get involved. That isn't a conversation for me. There's lots and lots of reasons, and I think this list is only growing. But what I'm really interested in is what happens then if we say, do you know what? I'm just going to avoid all those uncomfortable subjects, or I'm just going to avoid all those conversations I'm fearful of. I'm going to do that and throw away the key. What's the impact of that? And what's the impact on us as individuals if we say that? I think the first thing that will happen is we're going to reduce the amount of conversations that we have if we avoid all the ones we're fearful of. what that will then mean is that we will reduce the amount of people that we speak to as well. And unintentionally, we're going to start to exclude others as well. We can sort of think about as well, if we are limiting the amount of conversations we have, we're limiting who we speak to, we're going to limit the amount of fresh ideas and information that we get. The world is evolving so quickly, we don't want to get left behind. And if we're unintentionally creating exclusion, we can begin to think about what's the cost for our organisations as well. I was at an awesome conference. It's called the She Leads Legacy Conference. Happens every year in Manchester in October. It's the best conference that I go to, hands down. And one of the speakers last year was saying that on this topic, that if we stay in a place of fear, we kind of end up in paralysis, which sounds extreme, but we stay in a space of where we do nothing. And so often I hear from senior leaders, especially, this is one of their biggest barriers to get involved in diversity and inclusion. But what I'd like to do now is take this opportunity to kind of role play a little bit and have a safe space, and to think about this scenario that you might have come across at work already. If you haven't yet, it's highly likely you'll come across this situation soon. But let's imagine, and I'd like to invite you to get involved in the conversation, that you are at work, you're emailing a colleague back and forth, and you notice that in their signature, they used to have she, her pronouns, and then they've changed them to they, them. So you're emailing a colleague back and forth. They used to have she, her pronouns in their signature, and they now have they, them pronouns. What I want you to do is have a think now about how that situation could be handled well, what that looks like, and how that situation could be handled not so well. If at any point this is a triggering topic of conversation for anybody, please feel free to leave and rejoin in a few minutes, or turn your camera off or mute me for a little bit. That's okay too. But this scenario, has anybody come across this already? What do we think well or not so well looks like?
Brooklyn, I ran a training for one of our clients recently enough, who were on reception, and asked them had they come across this, and they hadn't, but they really thought that handling it well was not making any reference and treating the person exactly the same as before. And, they're using their name, you're accepting the pronouns. But I just thought it was interesting that because they were front of house and their job was, to make everyone feel welcome and everything, they just didn't see it as a problem. Whereas other people in their organization would be terrified and really not know what to do, So it was just the fear of getting it wrong would put other people into a spin about overanalyzing what you should do or shouldn't do. It was interesting just to hear it from them.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Lisa. And I try and remove a lot of context, because it depends on your role and who you are. If you're on reception and you're greeting people a lot, I used to be a receptionist and we'd welcome everybody by their name. We're encouraged to get to know them. So I've removed some context, so people feel free to add context. David, I can see you with me.
In my own experience, which is reasonably limited to family members who are now they, them, and the only way I've found of coping with that is, because I make mistakes all the time, is one is ask what's the right sort of word to use, and two, explain that I may not always get it right, but it's not intentional. That's kind of the only way that I can cope with that kind of situation, because it's kind of learning a new grammar, and it's kind of, I was never good at that. So I just have to kind of work hard at it, but be honest about it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where at first the words might feel a little bit alien in our mouth because we're not used to using those words. It's kind of like sometimes a name that we've not come across before, or when we're in a new country, I think, and instead of saying thank you, we might say gracias or merci. I've just got back from France. And then we get home and we start doing it again when we're back home as well. It's this slight tweak that first might feel a bit uncomfortable and strange, and being able to preface with, I might get it wrong at times, I might put my foot in it, is really helpful. I use this scenario a lot, and somebody shared with me once, for them, they were somebody that did change their pronouns to they, them, and to be mindful that adding they, them to their signature, that might be the very first step in learning their identity and becoming who they want to be, and having somebody say, hey, I see that you have changed your pronouns. I might have used the wrong pronouns when I've spoken to you in the past. I'm going to be more aware of my language going forward. If you ever want to chat about this, I'd love to understand more. Or I'm an ally, I see and I hear you. Context is very key here. If there's somebody that you work really closely with and you spend a lot of time talking to, might be an opportunity to have a conversation with us sometime, or to let them know I'd love to hear more whenever you're ready to chat. If this is somebody in another department you barely come across, going in and asking for a chat and opening up that way might be a bit much, but just letting them know that you're somebody that supports them, you see them. Often what I hear is not so well looks like just completely ignoring and using she, her because you find that more comfortable than they, them. So it's really about just respecting somebody's choices and doing some learning as well, which could be through having a conversation with them, but also doing the learning yourself as well, which I'll get onto in a little bit.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Because you've obviously spoken to a lot of people about this. You know a lot of people in this situation, and having somebody then come to you and say, "Look, is this the right way to do it?" etc., etc. It puts focus on the person. And sometimes I wonder, do they always want to be flag bearers for diversity? They just want to get on with their lives and not be on the spot. It kind of puts a spotlight on it, and I wonder, is everybody comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's really true. And you've done it already when you were talking about saying I might put my foot in it here. At the end of our session, I talk about what you can say if and when you get it wrong, but also building up to as well how we go about learning. And I'll share with you in a minute a little bit more about that, about how you might have seen at the start on my image where I was introducing myself. My colleague and my boss, Toby, is a wheelchair user. And if I want to learn about disability, of course I can learn through Toby, but it's going to be really draining if the only things I ever talk to him about are his disability.
Yeah.
And if my only opportunity is, oh, I'll ask Toby that. Instead, there's so many ways I can learn. So it's about, it wouldn't be right for me to ignore his disability because that wouldn't be seeing him either and being able to have those conversations because I work so closely with him, but also doing the learning myself,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is in a couple of slides' time. So thank you, David. I can see Rachel, or am I pronouncing your name correctly there?
Yeah, it's Rachel. No, I was just gonna say when I saw this scenario, this actually happened to me in real life. So one of my friends was she, her, and I didn't know that it was now they, them. So like when I was talking, I was like, oh yeah, she. And then when her partner started talking, she said they, and I kind of did a double take. And I just went, when are you day? Just out loud. And she just updated me and just we just kept it moving from there. So I think sometimes just saying it out, like rather than, beating around the bush or being avoidant, just like asking also helps.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Rachel, for sharing that and your own example there. It's also nice to hear that on a friend level as well, that even as friends, we can feel that uncomfortability at work, we can feel it, but as friends and being able to ask questions and be curious is really key. But there's ways we can do that as well. So now, I have a question for you. Before I go into the tips and before I pick up those conversations we just started, I'd like to ask you all who would be able to do their job with ease if I swapped your lovely shiny computer or laptop or phone you're using now with this one from the 90s. I would definitely struggle. I don't know if Zoom would be supported on this old computer, but we might know a colleague whose language is stuck in the 90s with this computer as well. Now, the reason this is on the screen is because tech is constantly evolving and our language is too, but there is a big difference. Now, when our iPhones, got one here, when it's time for my iPhone to update, it's really easy. Apple say to me, would you like to update to iOS 20, 30, whatever number it is? All I have to do is hit yes, wait a few minutes and it's done. But sadly, when it comes to our language, it's not as simple as hitting the update button. We have to do the sort of the manual update ourselves. And this is what I'd like to dive in with you now to give you some tips that will help us to continually work on and do that manual update. I would like us to start from the position that you've all covered already, that generally people aren't offensive on purpose. And we can see mistakes as an opportunity to start a dialogue from where we can both learn about each other. Now, I've started to talk about Toby a little bit already. Toby is my manager. He is disabled, he has a disability, and he was born with his disability. And he tells me that when he is out and about, he can often hear young children say to the person they're with, "What's wrong with that person? Why is that person in a wheelchair?" Usually quite loudly. And often their parent, their guardian, will respond and say, "Shh, we don't talk about that," and really try and silence that discussion around difference. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Let's imagine that we are at work. We're told by our manager that we have a new joiner and they'd love for them to shadow you for the day. I'm like, yeah, pretty simple. You can watch me, shadow me. I'll let you know what the ropes here. And when you are introduced to this new starter, they're a wheelchair user. And immediately you're having this internal rapid conversation of, is this something I bring up? Would the right thing to be with you to ignore it? Is the right thing to talk about it? But how do I talk about it? What do I do? You start to think about the last time you had a conversation about disability was perhaps with a parent who told you, "Shh, we don't talk about that." But what if instead of, with that new starter, instead of ignoring their disability, we ask them questions like, "How was your journey getting in today? If there's anything I can do to support you or make your life easier, let me know." Alongside all of the general get to know you conversation that you'd have with any other new starter as well. And one of the ways we can have sort of open conversations, one of the ways I can learn about disability is, of course, through having conversations with Toby. But it's really important that I do the learning myself as well. We hear a bit of a buzzword at the minute, this growth mindset. But how do we adopt a growth mindset? What does that actually look like? And Toby shared with me a really great mentality. It's called the lean back, lean forward, jump in mentality. So let's talk about disability, for example. I could learn about disability through leaning back. That's things like reading books, listening to podcasts, following amazing disabled content creators. All of those things are going to help me to learn about people who experience life and the workplace differently to me. I can then lean forward. So that would be coming to an event like this. I could join an online webinar, for example. I could go to a museum. I could go and learn and watch a TV show. The next thing, once I've leaned back, leaned forward, is then jumping in. And a really great way we can learn and jump in is through getting a mentor. Traditionally, we think of mentors as somebody is, I work in marketing, I want to move to marketing manager, I'll get a mentor who's a marketing manager or marketing director. But more a more updated way to think about a mentorship is thinking about reciprocal mentorship and having a mentor who experiences the workplace differently to you, to really challenge you and to learn about from each other as well. So this could be somebody that you meet every 6 weeks, half an hour for a coffee on Zoom. All of these ways are really going to help us to adopt that growth mindset and learn about how people experience the workplace and life differently to ours. There's also some great language guides that you can use as well if you want to continuously learn. You'll get mine that I created today, but Oxfam, they bring one out each year as well. But with continuous learning, it's just about staying open-minded. The next tip that I have, if we want to move through that fear of saying the wrong thing, is really to try and nurture a culture of curiosity. Ask more open-ended questions. So they could sound like, "I really think I should know more about. Could you help me understand it a bit better?" Or saying things like, "I'd love to know your perspective on." The next tip I have when it comes to being curious and open-minded is a bit of a brave one, but if anybody who's joining today or watching is a team leader, it's perhaps asking people, what's everyone thinking but no one's saying? Could you create an anonymous tool? You could use Mentimeter, for example, and ask that question, what's everyone thinking but no one is saying? Asking open-ended questions is really going to help us to see a perspective that's much different to our own. The next tip I have for you, if we're thinking about moving through the fear of saying the wrong thing, we're going to stay open-minded, going to adopt a growth mindset, but we'll also lean into humility. And humility is going to help us to move through that fear because it recognizes that it's okay not to have all the answers. Humility is about being open to learning from others. And one of the exercises we did as a team at Mildon, I'd love to do with you now. And if you want to, you can close your eyes, but I'd love for you to imagine now a humble leader. This could be somebody that you've worked with. It could be a fictional character. It could be a famous person or a famous leader. Once you have somebody in mind, have a think about what traits you see, what behaviors they show. Why is that trait, why is that behavior appealing? And I'd love to hear from you, to use the chat box or to unmute, to let me know what humble leader came to mind, because there is often a couple of names that come up every single time I ask that question. I'd love to see if they come up again here. Who was a humble leader that came to mind for somebody? Ah, Jacinta Arden, if I'm pronounced that correctly, listen to her audiobook right now. Yeah, great example. Yeah, we've got some support there. The famous name that I hear a lot when I ask this question are the Obamas. So Michelle and Barack Obama, they came up when we were having the conversation internally. Would you believe Aslan from Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, not a human, but humble and a great leader? Agreed with all of those. Nelson Mandela comes up a lot. That's a popular name. Often people also talk about Stephen Bartlett, who's the host of the Diary of a CEO podcast, one of the dragons on Dragon's Den. And I think of people like Stephen Bartlett, they interview people who are experts in their field. And he's very happy to say, I don't know about that. Will you tell me more about it? I think about Barack Obama, for example. Think of him having his shirt sleeves rolled up and no tie and kind of sitting on a level with somebody. These humble leaders, I imagine whoever came to you when you close your eyes and you imagine that person was somebody that admits that they don't have all the answers. They were somebody that is open to learning from other people. They embraced their imperfections and they learned from their mistakes. And you hear those humble leaders say things like, do you know what? I never stopped to think about it like that before. Or thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'm glad you've told me. I didn't know. Now I know. Kind of leaning into that humility and knowing that it's okay not to have all the answers and it's okay to be able to say, I don't know, really helps us to move through that fear of saying the wrong thing and feeling like we've always got to be an expert and have all the answers. Now, if I was to pick up a book off a shelf, this is a leadership book. It's an imaginary book, but I can see this imaginary leadership book is quite dusty. So I'm going to guess it's at least 10 years old and it's written by a British author. I imagine if I were to scroll through the pages of this imaginary, very old leadership book, we would see tips in there about having a stiff upper lip or the importance of having all the answers. It's highly, highly unlikely in this old leadership book we would see these words on the screen being encouraged. Things like vulnerability, for example. But vulnerability, being genuine, and being authentic is really key in building meaningful connections. And I chatted with some amazing leaders who are really great at showing vulnerability, which is not always easy to do, and being authentic. And they said some of the things that they do is they'll share personal stories to connect with their team. They admit they don't have all the answers. They're very comfortable saying, do you know what? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. They admit when they make mistakes. So their team knows that they aren't infallible, but they're committed to learning and growing. And of course, they'll talk about their career journey, They'll share the highs, the successes, but they'll also share the setbacks as well. And you hear them say things like, I want to have this conversation. I'm not sure what language to use. If I put my foot in it, just let me know. Now, working in the diversity inclusion space, this is a word we hear thrown around a lot, an ally. Who here would call themselves an ally? I'm going to raise my hand. An ally is a term we hear a lot. It's a very active term, and I really like the definition of an ally being somebody who champions underrepresented groups whilst not being a member of the group. For example, I am a straight woman, but I champion and support LGBTQI plus causes, and I choose to educate myself about them as well. Being an ally is a very active thing. And if we're able to be an ally, if we're able to build relationships with people from a wide range of different backgrounds, it's going to help us to move through that fear. A great tip that came out in a session like this, somebody said, do you know what I'm going to do? I am going to have a virtual or an in-person coffee with every single person in my team over the next quarter. They were asking themselves, who in the team am I not spending time with? And a great way to solve that is, over the next quarter, I'm going to have a catch up or a lunch with every single person individually in my team over the next quarter. Another way we can be an ally and build relationships and hear from different voices is next time you're on social media, just do a little bit of an audit. So whether you like to use LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, have a scroll when you're on the newsfeed and ask yourself, how diverse is the content that I'm consuming? Does everybody on my newsfeed look and feel similar to me? Really think about, who am I connecting with? Who am I hearing from? One of the best tips somebody gave me for working in diversity inclusion was sometimes we can be a bit of an echo chamber and think that everybody's really passionate about it and gets it. But it's really important to hear from the people who are unsure of diversity inclusion or perhaps even anti, and to follow a few of those people to really challenge your own views and voices and empathise and hear about the people who are anti-diversity inclusion as well. Also, recognising our privilege. That's another buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. But I think the privileges are the advantages and the disadvantages that we all have. But really think about and discuss ways you can use your advantages, use your privilege to support others. Now, there is something that I haven't touched on yet, something that we've teased a little bit, but it is the absolute inevitable. And it's this. It's all of these tips are great. They're going to help increase my confidence. But what do we do when we get it wrong? So we are human. We're going to put a foot in it at times. I get it wrong and I work in this space. So just like a muscle we want to build, we're going to have to practice. So when we get feedback, when we get it wrong, we can have some of these in our toolkit, in our locker. And you'll notice that they're quite short. A lot of them start with I statements, which is a really great tip when we're thinking about communication. We're not word vomiting and saying, oh my gosh, you can't say anything anymore, and rambling on. We're saying quite succinct things like, I see how what I said could have been interpreted that way. I'm going to be more aware of my language going forward. Or thanks for bringing that to my awareness. I'm glad you've told me. I didn't know, and now I know. We could even lean into the open-minded part and the curiosity part, and we could ask a question. We could say, wow, I never thought about it like that. Would you mind sharing more with me about it? Now, this list isn't extensive, and if you have your own that we could add to this list, please let me know in the chat box, and you will receive all of these in your toolkit, and they're there as inspiration as well. So what's next? I introduced myself at the start as a diversity inclusion consultant. I'm also a coach. So one of the things that coaches love to do is thinking about what's next and actions. And one of the things for me a goal that I set myself is that people don't leave a workshop of mine thinking, okay, that was interesting, but now what? We think about those allyship actions. What are the things we can do to be more inclusive? So you might be thinking, somebody I know could really do with hearing some of these tips today, but they might be afraid of joining a session like this. Perhaps having a think about what could you do to share today's knowledge with them. If we want to move through that fear of saying the wrong thing, if we want to have conversations that we're fearful of, some of the behaviours we can lean into and grow are things like showing humility, being vulnerable and being authentic, adopting a growth mindset, building relationships with a real wide range of different people, and being an ally for others. But if there's only one thing that each of you here take away from today's session, I would love it to be this, that all of us were always a work in progress. Sadly, there isn't an island of inclusion where we say, I've arrived, I'm here, I've read all the books, I've done all the learning. Diversity, equity, and inclusion work is ongoing and it is for everyone. Often people think diversity, equity, and inclusion, oh, that's that problem for HR. Oh, that's that thing for those people over there. I'm not quote unquote diverse, it doesn't involve me. But say if the only thing you take away, please let it be this, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion involves everybody. And by leaning into these behaviours, by trying to move through that fear of saying the wrong thing, what we can do is create real brave and safe spaces for our team to share feedback with each other when we get it wrong. And we can foster cultures for ourselves and for organisations that have real open, warm, and genuine communication. We're just about coming to the end of our time together now. We have a few minutes. It's been a real pleasure and a privilege to talk about one of my favourite topics. I'd love to hear from you and invite you now if there was anything that stood out to you today, or perhaps an action that you wanted to commit to. Feel free to share in the chat box or unmute.
Great. For anyone has any questions for Brooklyn, we have a minute or two. I think some of those bridging sentences, when you get the book, which we'll send afterwards, it's a 30-page guide. So lots of those sort of, when you've said the wrong thing, what you can say instead. So it's a really valuable tool. Thanks for that, Brooklyn.
My pleasure. Yeah, the guide is broken down into different sections. I don't think it's a great use of my time to say to everybody today in 45 minutes, these are the green words, these are the red words, these are the good words, these are the bad words, because it's depending on the situation, it grows and changes. But in the guide, it's split up into sections like disability, race, gender, for example. And there's, instead of using this phrase, try this. And I've chatted to lots of people with lived experience, and they let me know these are some of the things that I hear that really great on me. And this is how I prefer to be said to, or this is what we can lean into instead. So there's tons of tips, and you're welcome to share it with people too.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Brooklyn. If no one's any questions, we'll finish on time, which is rare for me. David, did you have something there?
No, I think, for me, the piece that is sticking with me is to lean back, lean forward, and jump in. That was really very interesting for me. That's what stuck with me.
Cheers, David. And you teased lots of my content already today, so thank you so much for that. And thank you for your vulnerability as well, and the people here like Rachel and David for sharing your stories and experiences as well.
Amazing. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you all. We will, sorry, Marie.
No, I was just saying thank you. Apologies, Julie. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. Thank you so much all for joining us. Lots of you do know Mantra, but for those who don't, we kind of work in this DEI space and culture, leadership, values, and brand. So if there is anything we can help with, get in touch. Or if you'd like to learn more about Brooklyn and Toby Mildon and the training they do, let us know. And next month, we will be doing a brand-focused impact culture session with David. So we hope you will join for that. Keep an eye out in your email. There'll be more information coming through. And we will send you a link to the recording of this as well. So thank you all, and on we go. New language.
Thanks,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We'll just stay on, Brooklyn, a sec.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marie. Bye, Nuala. Thanks, Philip. Oh.